Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Penrose House and to our event, Moving Upstream, Navigating the Future of Water in the Pikes Peak Region. I'm Thayer Tutt, Vice Chair and Chief Investment Officer of Pomar, and delighted to have you all here today. The Pikes Peak Heritage Series program began in 2016 as Pomar was looking to work with former Carter College professor Walt Hecox on developing initiatives around Pikes Peak. And it evolved into a program to celebrate and raise awareness of the natural assets of the Pikes Peak region. And we're doing it by convening, which we do in many different levels, to deal with the preservation, use, and protection of our natural assets. And so today's program very much fits right into what we've been trying to do for the last 8 years. I would like to recognize a few people from Pomar. We have two fellow trustees, Chairman Emeritus Bill Hibble. Where are you? Raise your hand, Bill Hibble. Up over there in the back corner. Thank you, Bill. And Matt Carpenter. Thank you. The origin of this program, this two-part program on water, started with the former director of the Heritage Series, Eric Oakley Courage. And so she's not here. She's actually visiting a sick relative up in Denver at a hospital. But I want to recognize her because she was the one who had the vision to develop the 1.0 and 2.0. And she came from the environmental community before becoming our Associate Vice President of Grants at Pomar Foundation, working for our very own Matt Carpenter. Matt, you didn't raise your hand, by the way. Where are you hiding out, Matt? Okay, come on. Oh, you're hidden over there with the chairman. Okay, all right. Good. Hey, smart move on your part. Good job. But I want to recognize Erica because she really did a wonderful job and she set the tone for today's event. And Stella, and so that leads me to the two staff members who put this entire thing together from Pomar's perspective. Senior Vice President Stella Hodgkins and Director of the program, who I'll introduce in about 1 minute to talk to you. And our second year fellow, Carlos, where's Carlos? Yes, so Carlos, buen dia, Sevilla, thank you very much. You're more nervous than I am. Okay, and you're sitting over there. Maybe I should make you come up here. But, and also we had 11 elected officials, RSVP, and I think 6 of them are here. Will you all, rather than call you out individually, I see one right over here, will you please raise your hands or stand up? Thank you. A couple of years ago, when we were talking about early programs in the Heritage Series, I was talking to former Mayor John Southers, and I said, would it be good to do a program on water? And he liked to always paraphrase an axiom from the 1800s, which was, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. So that's why we have the whiskey afterwards, but please don't fight during the program, right? Okay, that got a nod from them. But obviously, water is a big issue in Colorado with our semi-arid region, and also the allocation and use of the water. So our previous program, you'll hear about a little history of our history lesson, and then, but I do want to tell you we're very proud to partner with both Colorado Springs Leadership Institute as well as Colorado Springs Utilities on this program. They're two expert organizations that know their subject very well. So on that note, it's my time to turn it over to Stella, and you take it from here.
Let me adjust the mic a little lower. So hello, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know it's a little warm this afternoon, but this is a really important topic that we are very passionate about. Yeah, hold on one second. Let me try. Okay, sorry. Okay. So I'm Stella Hodgkins. Throughout the history of the Pikes Peak Heritage Series, we've held events on topics such as land stewardship, equity and inclusion, forest health, and the economic impact of greenways. This evening's event is unique as it serves as a continuation of last year's Moving Upstream event, which Thayer talked about, which explored the history and current state of water in the region. What we heard from attendees at that event was that there was an interest in a larger conversation on the solutions and future of water sustainability. Today, we're bringing together experts on water policy, conservation, and advocacy to provide an opportunity for the community to learn more about our regional water plans, interactions between water municipalities in the Pikes Peak region, and the role City Council plays in the process. I would like to thank Birgit Landin, Senior Community Education Specialist at Colorado Springs Utilities, who couldn't be here tonight, and Karen Pallas, Executive Director of Colorado Springs Leadership Institute, for working with us to put this program together for the residents of the Pikes Peak region. As we get started today with today's presentation and panel discussion, it's my pleasure to welcome Travis Steele, CEO of Colorado Springs Utilities, to the stage. He's held many positions in the 7 years he's been with Colorado Springs Utilities, where he's responsible for the safe and reliable operations of the utility's 4 services: electric, natural gas, water, and wastewater. Travis was sworn in as CEO in February of last year. Welcome, Travis.
So I think they said I got like 35 minutes for my part, so hopefully everybody grabs some snacks there.
Let me do one thing. I keep closing the PowerPoint here. I apologize.
They also don't let me use technology, so you can see Stella's taking that lead.
Well, I'm not doing a very good job. Okay.
Awesome. So thanks everybody for attending today. You know, it's encouraging always to see how many people actually care about water in our community. So as we take a look at, you know, what we've done in the past, the history, you know, our forefathers put a lot of effort into making sure we had water here. So it's really interesting. I always tell this story is, you know, I like engineering. I like to see stuff built. And the amount of infrastructure we've put in to really sustain this community for many years has just always been so impressive to me. And I'm sure a lot of people's got to take these water tours. And it sort of shows that integral infrastructure that we have to have because we just don't live on those natural tributaries. So, you know, we don't live on the Arkansas. We don't live on the South Platte. So we do have to have a little bit more of an elaborate system to bring water in from, you know, all the way from, you know, well, Buena Vista, you get up in there, you know, the Frying Arc area, all the way over to Breckenridge and all these areas. And all of that has took a lot of thought for the community. And on top of that, you know, we've had a great support from this community when it gets into conservation. So we've been able to really support water in this community for, you know, over 100 years. You know, we've celebrated that. And we've done a really good job at continuing to manage that. We're continuing to invest in our infrastructure, continuing to invest in our water reservoirs to make sure that, you know, all these great years we've had recently, the last few years, we're able to continue to store and utilize that water. So we have a phenomenal group at Colorado Springs Utilities, and, you know, Kim's going to be represented tonight, and there's several of them in the crowd that I'm sure will be around to answer questions later. But they continue to put a lot of thought on our water planning. But we do need community support, and I think that is what you represent today. We got to make sure that all of us are good stewards of our water. We make sure that we utilize it the best of our ability, and you have shown that year after year. So thank you for what you do to help us continue to supply water and manage water throughout the area. So we have what's called really a sustainable water plan, and really that's looking out the next 50 years. And you're going to see a lot of investment, you know, over the next, you know, 5 years to make sure that our Montgomery Reservoir is being enlarged, to make sure that these good years we're able to store it. You're going to see a lot more investment in our water infrastructure local, some of our water reservoirs local, as well as some of our treatment supply. So we don't want to take advantage of, you know, what our forefathers did at Colorado Springs Utilities and what the city leaders did within Colorado Springs. We want to make sure we are still investing for now and into our future. So with that, I know we have a great panel tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing, you know, some of the conversation around that and some of the questions you have. So I'm very excited. I'm still learning water. You know, I call it 2 to 3 year water person now. I see people in this room that's been in water their entire career, so I am still learning from my team and learning from those in the industry. So I actually take a lot from these meetings as well. So thank you for being involved. Thank you for continuing to support us in this endeavor. So with that, I do have the great honor to introduce Karen, if she would like to come up. So Karen actually is, by de facto, a really good water person. She worked 10 years at the city, running parks, and parks, of course, is heavily laden with water. And now she's the executive director, at the Colorado Springs Leadership Institute, and she's always been a great partner and advocate. So please help me in welcoming her.
Thank you. Let me see if I can make this work. We're just sliding it up or down? Just scroll down? Nope. All right, Travis, what happened? All right. I'm going to go back to my handy dandy notes. Here we go. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Karen Pallas, Colorado Springs Leadership Institute Executive Director, and it's really a privilege to be here. And my first duty as I step in today is to do the best impression of Birgit Landon I can in terms of water. So you all will let me know how I do. But one of the reasons Birgit wanted to be up here today is when we did this program last year, we heard from many of you that really wanted to learn more, dig deeper, find out more information and such. And that doesn't always happen, right, when you have a program. So raise your hand real quick if you were here last year. Okay, very good. So about half and half new and half not. So I'm going to share a little bit, just a quick recap, and then we're going to dig right in with our panelists. So I'm going to get started here and just share with you that number one of the things we covered last time was understanding water allocation and accountability. And what that relates to is the Pikes Peak region has witnessed remarkable growth in recent years, attracting our new residents due to natural beauty and our urban amenities, right? So we all came from maybe some other place. I came from Florida. How many of you still get mad when somebody else comes from the state you came from? Yeah, I've been here long enough. I'm with you all. However, the growth must be balanced with wise use of our limited water supplies and an understanding of all the needs that must be met. Colorado has some of the most complex water laws in the nation, guided by the principle of first in time, first in right. And I knew I was in trouble coming from Florida to Colorado when I heard treaty. The word treaty was really kind of fun. So, but CSU taught me well and right away. Water users must adhere to local, state, and federal allocation agreements that are strictly enforced. So agricultural, municipal, industrial, environmental, and recreational water needs must be met, as well as compact agreements we have with other states. So it's not about loving that natural resource. It's really understanding all the underlying rules and regulations that go along with that. A majority of our panel focused on the Colorado River, and we really wanted to bring that to mind last year. It supplies water to 40 million people in 7 states, plus Mexico, and it has been over-allocated for many years. More and more, we are held accountable for making sure every drop of water is put to good use without causing injury to other users and the health of our local watersheds. So that was item 1 that we really focused on and covered. Item number 2 is climate change and water stability. Variations in our climate continue to impact the stability of the Colorado River systems. So Colorado Springs Utility sources over half of its water from the Colorado River Basin. So decreased hydrology coupled with over-allocation poses significant challenges. Higher evaporative loss, earlier snowmelt runoff, and lower soil moisture, resulting in less water available for storage effects, not only our water supply, but also the agricultural growing seasons. And I know many of our farmers and agricultural folks out there have experienced that for many years. Additionally, forest fires have increased in intensity, accelerating soil erosion and other detrimental impacts to watersheds. These challenges underscore the urgency of responsible water management practices. And that was item number 2. So item number 3, again, is focusing, and it's one of the things that we really strive for in the Colorado Springs Leadership Institute, is that collaborative, bringing people together, bringing other voices together, and a variety of voices. And so We spoke about collaborative solutions and public engagement. And as our population doubles, individual water usage has decreased, signaling positive trends, and this is what Travis was talking about just a little bit ago, that all of you are participating, right? You're helping with those water conservation efforts. Those collaborative efforts are essential. At the state level, the Colorado Water Plan fosters cooperation through funding and technical resources. Community members can contribute by adopting water-efficient practices such as resilient landscaping and household efficiency upgrades. Informed and engaged public input is crucial for shaping the region's water future. This last statement bears repeating. Engaged public input is crucial to shaping our region's water's future. Today's panel will hopefully inspire you to active participation for protecting the precious resource. Please visit the water conservation table in the back. You guys raise your hands. They did a wonderful job with all kinds of goodies back there for you guys to engage with. Visit them and they'll show you many ways that you as an individual in the community can get engaged and work on water conservation. So thank you, Birgit. Fantastic words and recap, so give her a round of applause. All right, I do okay? You guys are still with me? Very good. All right, well, I'm going to take on my role and put my other hat on as the executive director. In Colorado, with our arid climate and rapidly expanding population, we face unique challenges in ensuring our sustainable water supply for our residents, agricultures, and our industries, right? Those businesses take a lot of water. The Colorado Springs Leadership Institute finds it important to support programs like this that we're here to and with you all today because they foster informed and engaged individuals in the community. By empowering individuals with knowledge and tools to address water sustainability, we can collectively work towards our solutions that benefit everyone. Our commitment to take such initiatives underscores the importance of collaborative efforts in tackling the significant environmental challenges that we face. Today, as we go through our programming, we hope that you all will gain a deeper understanding of the work being done in water policy in the region and discover how, as community members, you can contribute to that long-term sustainability. Our goal is to promote a collective understanding of why we should care deeply about the future of our water resources here in Colorado Springs. We are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts here today to share their insights, experiences, and expertise. Through their dialogue, we hope to help each of you become better advocates on water sustainability and the future of water and well-being in the Pikes Peak region. So are you ready to meet our panelists? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So I'm going to start on the far left down here. We have Kim Gortz, Manager of Water Resources with Colorado Springs Utilities. Kim, welcome. And to her right, we have Jesse Schaefer, District Manager of Woodmore Water and Sanitation District Number 1. And to Jesse's right, we have Brian Risley, who is a City Council member for Colorado Springs and also a Colorado Springs Utility Board member. He has a few other titles like architect, and I'm going to claim him. He's a Colorado Springs Leadership Institute graduate. So, woohoo! Thank you, Brian, for being here. All right, so we have a great lineup of questions, and we're going to start with our local water plan, and I'm going to join them at the panel. Thank you all. They started clapping before I was ready. Okay. I am on. Very good. All right. So we're going to give our first question about 10 minutes to each of our panelists. They all have very different ones to cover the variety of topics we wanted to cover with you all tonight. So let's start with local water plan and Kim Gortz. What is the Colorado Springs long-range water resource plan, and what are its 5 components?
All right, so I think I have a slide maybe or two to just have up on the screen as well.
Carlos? Okay.
In a second.
All right.
But I'll go ahead and get started because I only have 2 slides, but I'm supposed to talk for about 10 minutes, and that might go longer, I don't know. So I think the introduction was clear that living in the West has been a challenge for water development. Even when we developed our city in the early 1870s, it was going to be a challenge, and everybody recognized that we were going to need infrastructure in order to bring water supplies to the city and serve our needs as we were growing. If we do get a slide up, I'm not going to go through each one of the developments, but what's important to know is we have to look at our past in order to plan for our future. And we realize some of the things, the trends, the things we've learned through the years that are going to help us address our future challenges as well. And in my mind, future challenges are really about opportunity for innovation, collaboration, and really coming up with solutions that at this time are very much multi-purpose, where maybe in the past we were very focused on a couple uses. But like I said, I'm not going to read through each one of these, but I wanted to highlight a couple points on this timeline. The first being where you see a red drop and the little people graph. That was early on in the kind of the 50s and 60s when we were seeing some population growth as well as a drought. We were facing drought, and we knew that was going to be a challenge. The Air Force Academy was also trying to site itself, and Colorado Springs was one of those towns that they were considering. And so our founders knew that we couldn't serve with the Pikes Peak sources. We had already pretty much exhausted those, and that was when our first Trans Mountain diversion project was being considered. So that's the Blue River system. All in that time period too, there was the Homestake system, which was another Trans Mountain diversion being considered, as well as the Frying Pan Arkansas project, which was supposed to help supplement water supplies for the Arkansas Basin and the agriculture here in the basin. So also to note here on this timeline is that about every 1 to 2 decades, we really had to make a big investment in our infrastructure and our system in order to serve what some of the drivers that were going on, which is either drought or population growth. So we had to balance those two as we moved through the timeline you see in front of us. The last kind of challenge that we really faced is a project that we were trying to get permitted, the Homestake 2 project, which faced environmental challenges. It also first faced 1041 challenges, and we did not see a successful project get implemented. And that is, again, when we look back in history, something we have to learn from today as we're moving projects forward. What happened is we kind of went back to the drawing board, and in 1996, we came up with the Southern Delivery System project, and that was a project based on making sure we had efficient use and reuse of the supplies that we had available to us at the time, and we wanted to be able to build that conveyance project, and it benefited other folks in the region, as we could also bring up Frying Pan Arkansas sources more efficiently. So these drivers of growth and economic development and drought have always been with us, and they continue to be with us. And how and what we are doing and how we develop and our success, well, it hinges on successful permitting. It hinges on successful collaboration with partners. And so this is not necessarily a new thing, but it's just a little different than the way it was in the past. And I always like to say that it's important to plan, but it's very important to do. So you can't just stick your plan on the shelf and wait, for the time to actually implement some of these ideas. A lot of the ideas we're implementing today were actually ones that were on the books for the last 50 years. And so we're really trying to follow through on those, knowing that we were going to have to implement those as our community grew or we were faced with risks and other challenges that kind of unfolded through time. So next slide. Oh, there you go. So how do we do that? Really, I like to talk on why do we plan and how do we plan and what is in the plan. So, the why do we plan is because we have a very complex system. I know a lot of faces out there. You've probably been on our tours. We work with 25 reservoirs. We're in 3 river basins. We have only 4 transmission mains that connect us to our water supplies. We're not on a major river, but we do rely on the rivers heavily in order to move water around, as well as our reuse. So it's something that we're very cognizant of that challenge of where our water sources are and how we get them to the city. We also have fairly junior water rights, so that's why we rely on those storage reservoirs, because that yield that we get and the hydrology that provides the physical water that we can divert is not always legally available year-round. We have to be very focused on diverting, storing, and being able to serve those demands through the whole year. And so we definitely plan around those risks and that variability. And so just to kind of, again, talk about, we have a risk-based planning approach. So we try to understand, what does the hydrology do? What is climate looking like? How is this going to impact the variability of our sources? How are we going to buffer that, or buffer our system? We look at the Colorado River, and we've been looking at that for decades as to what might curtailment look like. And we incorporate that into our planning. And so we understand what our system can serve through those types of variabilities, and what we want to, how we can stay resilient through that variability, but also what we might need in the future as the demand grows on that system. So how do we do this? Well, we build a sustainable water plan that's integrated across our system. Again, when you're looking at multiple basins, multiple diversions, you have to integrate that. It's not just one point of diversion and one point of delivery. And we look at how we manage that. We look at how we're going to address climate issues. We talk to stakeholders, we talk to partners, and we also have a robust planning process that we bring in the community to look at that plan going forward. And really what we want it to be is adaptive. So when I talk about what's in the plan, we usually have a range of options or scenarios and alternatives that we're pursuing, and that's because we don't always have a crystal ball. I can say we do not have a crystal ball. But we can have, we can put some bookends on that. We generally know what trade-offs will be. If we can't get one project, we might have to pursue another. And so we put in a range of options in there. And as we are successfully achieving one, we may put another one on the back burner. If we're not successful, say, acquiring a certain water right, we may then add more storage, and so that we can manage the water rights that we have better. And so what's in there now is what you see up top, the portfolio. I didn't put the specific numbers in there, but we are looking at Colorado River from the Continental Hoosier system. That's one we're trying to improve and capture some of those sources that we have available for, physically and legally to us. We're also looking at water sharing, which is with agriculture in the lower Arkansas Valley. We're looking at how to do that through ag efficiencies, better management of crop types, or just on-field management in order to produce some yield that can go to the city. We also have conservation, which is a cornerstone. You don't get any project permitted unless you have a strong conservation program and you're showing that you're efficient with what you have already. We're also working on storage projects. As we acquire water, you also have to have some storage in order to manage that water. And so storage is a very critical piece to managing those water supplies and the risk that's associated with that. And the last one is our reuse. And the reuse is really more about building some efficiency and some regional collaboration for our region around reuse. And I think Jesse might talk a little bit more about that, so I'll kind of leave it at that. So that's really kind of how we plan, what we plan, and what's in the 5 components of our plan.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kim. I know that was 10 minutes of a very large document, where we might find more information if we want to learn more.
Yes, of course, that's on csu.org.
Very good.
And I believe it's, there might even just be a link straight to our water plans right there on the landing page, but I can also provide that to you for folks
Fantastic.
who want.
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate you. All right, Jesse, we're going to talk a little bit more. We've talked local water plans, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about regional water plans. And so tell us a little bit about Woodmore Water and Sanitation District. What are you doing currently, and how is collaboration being built here in the Pikes Peak region?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I guess I'll speak to the latter half of that question first, dealing with collaboration. And really, in my opinion, collaboration is, it's born out of a collective need and desire and opportunity. And so, to go back 20 or 25 years, as I understood it, when I first got into this business in the region, everybody was pretty much operating as sort of their own silo. There really wasn't a clearinghouse or an organization that brought people together. Back in the early 2000s, I believe, the Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority was founded. Lots of water providers belonged to that particular agency in and around the Colorado Springs area and sort of the whole Colorado Springs metropolitan area. There's better than a dozen individual water providers that serve customers in the region. We can name, 4 or 5 of them sitting in the audience here tonight. And so it's good to see all of those folks. But nonetheless, Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority has made it pretty easy to meet, greet, know your neighbors, know your sister agencies, know the counterparts in those agencies, and talk with them. And over the last, 15 or 20 years, we've gotten to know each other rather well. And everybody has their own unique challenges associated with water supplies, and as Kim talked about planning and how you're going to build in sustainability and resiliency and all those great things. But moreover, we all have the same needs. Not everybody's needs are identical, but we all have the same needs, and so that really does foster collaboration. And so for a lot of us, especially a lot of water providers up north, Woodmore in particular, we're 100% dependent upon Denver Basin groundwater. And for those that don't know what Denver Basin groundwater is, it's a series of 4 aquifers, deep aquifers that were developed back in some Mesozoic or some era. But by and large, I think we'll talk a little bit more about more definitive attributes of the Denver Basin aquifers later on in the discussion. But by and large, the Denver Basin aquifer system is finite. It doesn't recharge. The simple explanation is there's no recharge into it. There's some finer points we can get into later about it. There is a small amount of recharge in a few of them, but nothing compared to the amount of well pumping and the amount of consumption pulling out of those particular aquifers. And so, we've known this since at least Woodmore was created back in the early 60s. We've known it all along. In terms of an interim water supply, it's a great water supply. And when I mean interim in the water world, interim means, 60, 80, 100, 150 years perhaps. But in terms of Denver Basin aquifers being a long-term water supply for our customers, for others that are similarly situated, it's really not a long-term sustainable solution. And when we talk about supplying our community and our public with water, for us, what we interpret that to be is it's a perpetual obligation by any water provider to serve their community with water in perpetuity, and that's just pretty much the task that was given to us. So obviously, Denver Basin groundwater is a real challenge from a long-term sustainability standpoint. Back in 2011, Woodmore went out. We purchased renewable water supplies on Fountain Creek, became a shareholder in a mutual irrigation ditch company that used to irrigate farmland, and now most of the ditch company is owned by municipalities and water providers in the region. But it's those types of needs that bring people together, and you start talking about, well, what are we going to do long term? How are we going to serve our communities? Everybody's got a lot of the same need, and so that really does tend to build collaboration. And then, like I said earlier, the Pikes Peak Regional Water Authority is a great platform to do that within. We can actually do projects underneath that umbrella and a lot of great and wonderful things. But specifically, in addition to having a water supply challenge, now some of us have solved that issue for themselves in terms of going out and getting renewable water supplies. Some haven't and are continuing to work on that. But in addition to the supply issue and sustainability related there too, there's this infrastructure challenge. And I tell my customers in my district all the time, I'd rather have an infrastructure challenge than a water supply challenge, simply because I can hire lots of engineers and smart people to design these systems to get the water from A to B. However, one of the other big, I guess, incentives for regional collaboration and working together, one big incentive is the fact that when you're a small municipal water supplier, these projects are wildly expensive. To build pipelines, to build treatment facilities, to build storage reservoirs and storage vessels, pump stations to push the water from downhill, uphill. And so we're talking, tens of millions all the way into the hundreds of millions of dollars for these projects. And when you're a very small community, your size limits you in terms of economies of scale. And so there's where collaboration really comes into play. Seeking out partners with similar interests, similar needs, similar desires to team up with, to pool resources, to gain those economies of scale when you're building these particular systems. So that's a very big motivational driver behind wanting to collaborate, wanting to forge partnerships and relationships with sister agencies in order to cost share in these types of projects. And quite honestly, I think, in my personal opinion, the days of going it alone, from a financial perspective, they're over with. You just can't afford to go it alone. You have to partner up and go it with other folks. And so what Woodmore has specifically done recently, and it's not by ourselves, it's also with some partners, the Town of Monument, Woodmore Water and Sanitation District, Denala Water and Sanitation District. I'll give a shout out to Wayne. He's over on the Denala board, so nice to see you, Wayne. But anyway, and Cherokee Metropolitan District. And so we have been working on a project. We call it the Loop Water Project. I know, not very inventive, but there is some thought behind that name. And what this particular project does is it takes renewable water supplies that Woodmore and Denala and others own on Fountain Creek, and it'll actually divert these water supplies off Fountain Creek into the head gate of the Chilcott Ditch. And to give you some perspective on where the Chilcott Ditch starts, it's basically Fountain Regional Park. If anybody has been down in the city of Fountain, 85, 87 headed south on the right-hand side, great big, really nice park at the, I'd say the northwest corner of that park. They sort of have a trail, which is our ditch access road. And of course, we divert water off of Fountain Creek into the head gate of the Chilcott Ditch. And then water runs down Chilcott Ditch, which is literally just an earthen ditch. And about 8 miles and terminates into a small reservoir called Callahan Reservoir. And so the purpose of the project is we would divert not only the renewable water supplies off of Fountain Creek for first use, we would also divert reusable effluent credits that are floating down the stream from everybody's discharges upstream in Fountain Creek from their communities. And so it's a system where we're doing first use and we're doing reuse, and then we're doing successive use to extinction on these water supplies. And so by and large, everybody's bringing assets and contributions to the table, and everybody's actually going to be getting wet water in certain quantities out of the system. So it's a unique system where we would build some treatment facilities down at Callahan Reservoir, which, by the way, we call it a stone's throw. It's not quite that. It's about a mile west of Colorado Springs Utilities Williams Creek Pump Station, and near the site of where their Williams Creek Reservoir is currently planned to be constructed in the future. So, you know, there's some real geographic synergies and some real geographic things going on here that also enable collaboration and opportunity. From there, we'd treat the water, we'd pump it north. Cherokee owns a pipeline called the Sundance Pipeline System, which just north of the Colorado Springs Airport, if anybody's been over to Mark Scheffel and Tamlin, there's a big tank there. That's essentially the southern terminus of the Sundance Pipeline. The Sundance Pipeline runs north from that point and terminates on the northern side, somewhere around Hodgen Road and Black Forest Road. And then, of course, we would pipe from that particular point north and westerly into the Monument, Denala, and Woodmore service areas. And then, of course, the process starts all over. Reusable effluent credits get discharged into the stream system. They float back down to Chilcott. We combine them with first use water from water rights on Fountain Creek, and we just loop them around the system. So, like I said, not a very inventive name, but certainly paints a picture of what we're trying to do. And so this is a project we're trying to get off the ground and get into construction probably in the next 2 to 3 years. Hopefully maybe next year. We're still dotting some I's and crossing some T's on that. So this project for us is pretty imminent, and currently it only involves 4 service providers. However, we are also, well, I say also, we continue to be in the thick of things relative to some bigger projects that are coming down the pike that are a little bit more forward and longer thinking, probably on the 10, maybe 15-year horizon. We might talk about this a little bit more later on too, but essentially Kim had mentioned the reuse. IPR is an acronym for indirect potable reuse. It's where you basically reuse your water supplies throughout your system, and basically what you're doing is you're stretching your water supplies as far as you can stretch them, and that's just good stewardship. And I think in the future, at least in Colorado, everybody's going to be doing those types of systems. Another example would be the WISE water project up in Denver. South Metro, a bunch of South Metro water supply communities, water suppliers got together and built a rather large set of facilities and infrastructure in order to basically lease or purchase reusable supplies from Aurora and Denver Water, and they're doing a very similar thing up there. Their project's constructed, and they're actually making deliveries today. And along with that concept, we're engaged. Hopefully we get some grant funding for a study, feasibility study that we're asking for, again, under the Pikes Peak Regional Water umbrella. But basically, I described the Loop project just a moment ago, but the IPR project, or the Water Efficiency Use Project, I forget the exact name you guys are calling it. That particular project is very similar to the Loop. It would still divert water at the Chilcott Ditch Headgate. Instead of storage in Cowhen Reservoir, we'd store water in Williams Creek, potentially commingle that water with supplies coming out of Pueblo Reservoir through utilities, Southern Delivery System, potentially being able to share in treatment facilities. I know that the Bailey Water Treatment Plant that Utilities owns is a very nice, new, and modern facility that potentially could treat a lot of water and deliver it to regional partners. Basically, once you get this water into Colorado Springs distribution system, anybody who's near it or it runs through their service areas, potentially you could get deliveries from that particular IPR system from, you know, City of Fountain all the way up to Woodmore, all the way up to the county line. So it's a very exciting project. It's a little bit further out on the horizon, but we have a lot of member agencies very interested in various aspects of that particular project, and we continue to push it forward too.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Jesse. Appreciate that. And I think the message around that is not everybody has the ability to get it all done themselves, but we all need to make sure we work together to make sure it all gets done, right? So thank you very much. Appreciate that. dialogue on that and some exciting projects on the horizon. We're going to change our pace a little bit and head into decision making. You saw a little bit about the plans and things that are happening in the different areas within our community, both locally and regionally, but how do those decisions get made and who makes those decisions? And so we're going to handle these next couple of questions with Brian Risley here. And so, Councilmember, what is City Council's role in terms of staying informed on our water issues, and what do they do to make sure we ensure we have water sustainability going forward?
Well, thanks, Karen. Both very important questions, and it's hard to follow two incredible subject matter experts, so I'll do my best to talk about these topics. But as Karen mentioned before in the introduction, Colorado Springs City Council members also serve in the role as utility board members. And so by definition, we are the governing body for overseeing all of the things that Kim was just talking about. So it's our job to be really informed in all of that. We as a board are very familiar with the integrated resource plan that Kim was referencing before, with the various points and components of that plan. I've read it cover to cover numerous times. It's a really important document for me to understand and for us as a board to understand, so that we are aligning decisions that we make with the overarching master plan that was put in place back in 2017. And we'll eventually revisit that plan and update it, which will also be an important endeavor given the changes that have happened to the community, the amount of growth, and so forth. One of the things that we do throughout most of the year at the Utilities Board meetings is we get reports on the monthly snowpack and runoff amounts. And that's really important for utilities to track, and it's important for us as decision makers to be aware of, so that we are constantly aware of how much water do we have in storage, how much are we transmitting down to use as finished water as opposed to sitting in reservoirs up in the mountains. Are there any issues or concerns with the reliability of that system or the reliability of the water quality? And we want to understand very carefully what the confines are with regard to the supply side of things. Equally important, every month we look at the usage reports. So we look to see how many millions of gallons per day and millions of gallons per month are being used by the City of Colorado Springs through CSU. And we track those trends closely to make sure that we're, again, hitting the targets that the staff have set out, and that we're staying on track with what we believe to be the needs of the community. One of the things that was done prior to my election to City Council, but I think is important to mention, is the 125% buffer that was put in place by the prior council in the form of the Water Extension Ordinance. And the idea with that is that if there is new growth in the form of annexations, we want to make sure that we've got not just excess capacity, but 25% in addition to excess capacity with those annexations. And so I'll talk in a few minutes about some specific numbers, but I think that's an important thing for our citizens to understand and recognize, that there is that checkpoint in place when it comes to annexations, and we look at that as part of the process for deciding or determining whether we have the capacity for bringing on additional growth. In addition to that, this is sort of a tangential comment to that Water Extension Ordinance, but we recently made a change to the city code requiring CSU to look at all 4 services, because we were finding that, first of all, they were doing that by practice, so we codified what was being done previously. But second, it's very important for us to make sure that we've got not only water capacity, but we've got electric, gas, and wastewater capacity as well, because again, it's our responsibility to serve all 4 of those utilities. So I just wanted to touch on that was an important code update that we implemented since I've been on council. Both Jesse and Kim have talked at length about how we've encouraged conservation. I think Karen made the point that we are using we're using this less water today than we were using 30 years ago, and our population has doubled over that span of time. So let that sink in for a minute. Population doubled, usage stayed flat over 30 years. Now, if you look at the graph, it spiked, but it dropped back down because CSU has been so committed to encouraging conservation, and the citizens have responded. So I think that's a really important factor to keep in mind, and kudos to staff for putting those expectations in place and making that come to fruition. The other thing that as council and as utilities board that we do to stay informed on water use and the kind of the role that we play with sustainability is to support the development of additional water rights and the ability to store those water rights throughout the system through reservoir expansions and other capacity increasing opportunities. So we want to conserve on the one hand, but we also know that we're going to continue to grow as a community, so it's important for us to continue developing those resources, and we're going to talk a little bit more about where some of those resources come from in a few minutes. The other thing that I feel is really important is in the same way that our predecessors were visionary and forward-looking with something like the Southern Delivery System that Kim mentioned, I feel like it's our job and our role as current board members and city council members to be equally visionary and forward-looking, because if we don't, we will paint ourselves into a corner, and that's a disservice to not only current residents but to future residents as well. So I think it's important to be forward-looking and futuristic in our mindset when we think about development and when we think about the resources that it takes to meet that need. And I think that was kind of all I wanted to say on that one.
Okay, very good.
I was about ready to roll into the next question that you haven't asked.
I'm going to ask you about that one. How about that? All right, thank you. And I really appreciate you sharing with the group really the roles that City Council and the Utility Board have, because not everybody really understands how intricate that is and how much work is involved in that, right, folks? A lot of work. Very good. All right. Brian, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd share a little bit more. I know you've been working very closely with the planning department on many of the new changes and modifications that are happening. Tell us how the city's infrastructure planning impacts our future regional water use.
Sure. So I'll kind of put my planning hat on for a minute and talk from that lens as well. I think one of the most important things that the city has taken into account in recent years are policies around infill, redevelopment, densification, things of that nature, as opposed to continuing to sprawl and grow on the perimeter. And so when a few years ago, when Retool COS was brought forward, one of the major focal points was this idea around infill and redevelopment within the confines of the city, specifically looking at higher and better uses for whether it's vacant land or underutilized properties and things of that nature. And the reason that that's important, I think, really goes beyond just utilities. I think it spans everything from transportation and road maintenance to certainly utility infrastructure and making the most of infrastructure that we have in the ground, as opposed to, again, having to extend things out to the periphery. It obviously has a component with regard to police and fire coverage that are already covering within the city. But kind of going back to the utilities piece of it, it's much more efficient and effective for Colorado Springs Utilities to serve areas that are inside the city, in areas, again, that are maybe underutilized or greenfield areas that just have never developed within the city of Colorado Springs. So I think that's an important policy piece. I think that's definitely something that the planning department has looked at relative to infrastructure. As I mentioned, densification. You've probably heard some conversations recently around the downtown core and whether we should be building up or building out, if there should be a height restriction on buildings, and I'm certainly not going to get into any of that tonight. But the reason I mention it, again, is that we've got a lot of utility infrastructure downtown already. And so I think there's a case to be made, or there's certainly an argument to be made, that if we can kind of fit more use within, again, the footprint of the existing city, that makes it more efficient for Colorado Springs Utilities to serve and prevents us from having to serve in an expansive way outside of the community. The other thing that I think we do from a policy standpoint and in terms of looking at city infrastructure, I think we want to encourage industrial users, high-tech manufacturing users, and other sorts of employers to be very mindful about the way they use water. So oftentimes when we hear an industrial users coming to Colorado Springs, one of the first questions is, well, how much water are they going to use? Microchip manufacturers, for example, tend to use a lot of water. I think it's really important to underscore and for our citizens to understand that those employers, those major manufacturers, use reuse systems. So it's a closed loop system, and it's not like they're pumping in millions of gallons of water and just dumping it into the creek the next day. They reuse that water as many times as they possibly can. I've worked with some manufacturers that actually do things like granite countertop production, and they use high pressure water saws to cut the granite and to form it. We've developed and designed some systems that are very efficient reuse systems that are closed loop cycles and allow them to reuse, in some cases, up to 90 or 95% of the water that they're using. So again, it's not like it's an open tap that's just dumping into their businesses and out into the stream. Tangential to that, I'll just mention car washes. Has anybody noticed the number of new car washes in Colorado Springs? I just want you to know, car washes, like a lot of industrial manufacturing, are closed loop reuse systems. So just because we have more car washes does not mean we're necessarily using more water, at least in Colorado Springs. On the reuse topic, I think Jesse did a great job of explaining the loop system, but from a Colorado Springs utilities perspective, I'll just comment that 75% of the water that we process through the city, we can legally reuse. So again, 75%. If we can find ways of capturing that water and reusing that water into extinction, we are definitely ahead of the game. And that's something that Colorado Springs Utilities is very closely looking at, trying to understand how we can make the most of that as a resource. Because again, if we can't reuse it, if we are not smart about that, it's going to require fresh water from the mountains to make up the delta in usage. And then lastly, I'll just comment that I think from a policy standpoint, from a planning standpoint, in terms of infrastructure, all the things that Jesse mentioned in terms of the regional view of water usage are really important. As he mentioned, we've got a situation in the county, in unincorporated El Paso County, where we've got a lot of water users that are on non-renewable groundwater resources. And how do we as a community deal with that going forward? And I've heard some people say that, well, we're Colorado Springs, that's the county's problem. Personally, I'm just speaking from my own personal belief, I think that's a really difficult position to take because, again, we're El Paso County, we're a region, we're a community, we're the Pikes Peak region. And so I believe that we ought to be pretty smart and pretty proactive about looking at how we as a region can start to solve some of those questions, because the clock is ticking, and having been on the County Planning Commission as many years as I was, it's an issue. It's definitely a concern. El Paso County, unlike the rest of the state, though, does have a 300-year requirement that you've got to prove water rights for 300 years, as opposed to the rest of the state, which only requires 100 years. We're all going to be gone in 100 years. We're all going to be gone in 300 years. But the legacy that we leave now, I think, is a really important thing that we should be discussing and that we should be planning for a good regional solution. And I actually have a couple of other points that I just remembered. I thought that was my last one. But kind of going back to what Kim was talking about, I just wanted to comment that when it comes to infrastructure planning, one of the things that's really important for us as utilities to do is to look at that portfolio balance. She mentioned the amount of water that we get from the Colorado River, the amount that we get from agricultural transfers that come up from the Arkansas Valley, and looking at how we manage demand and manage transmission systems, storage systems, and as I said, reuse systems. All of those 5 things interplay with each other in a really important way. And how we view that from an infrastructure standpoint and how we apply our thought process from a policy perspective really is dependent on that mix and the level of risk that we're willing to take on as a community. And finally, I'll close with a number that I just want people to be aware of. We currently have the ability to serve about 95,000 acre feet a year. And I think I've got that right. And Abby Ortega, the expert, is sitting here, so she's not waving her arms at me, but 95,000 acre feet per year. And at full build out in, say, 2070, 2080, we expect the demand to be about 159,000 acre feet per year. So right now we're serving about 500,000 people. At that point, we expect to be serving close to 1 million people. How we get from where we are today to that point, I think, is the crux of the concern and the reason why we've got so many great experts like these two to my left and others in the room focused on long-term water solutions for our region. Thanks.
Great, fantastic. Well, you actually, I think, answered a few questions we received prior to the session, so we'll take that as an additional bonus. All right, I'm going to start with Kim on the end. This question is for all of you. But I know as a professional, as a city official, I served on a water planning group for about 2 years. That's a long time, just so y'all know, but it's a really good opportunity to learn a lot and work with the microchip folks. It was the providers that really use a lot of water. So I got to be part of that and part of that dialogue and conversation. How can community members, like the folks here in this room, get involved? How do they be a part of those decision makings and engage with you all?
So I think the first one is we do an update to that water resources plan on about a 7 to 10 year cycle. And the reason that is because we usually identify projects that we want to try to implement, and we need to understand if we're going to successfully implement some of those things, if we're going to successfully acquire some new sources of water. And that does take time. And so once we get some of those permits in hands or the decrees in hand, and we're kind of comfortable with what we're going to, say, yield from a water share in the lower Arkansas, or how much we're actually going to be able to enlarge a storage bucket, we can then go back to our modeling and we can assess what's next and what do we need to do. How do we balance that, or what are the big policy questions we need to ask? And those policy questions tend to revolve around those trade-offs that we have to understand and accept and or address as we are continuing on. And so that is an opportunity. We usually do that through, say, the Utilities Policy Advisory Group and the Utilities Board. We tend to advertise for more public and stakeholder input at that point. But that isn't maybe, enough. That's like a large block of time that a lot of people want to provide their input and feedback sooner, it was great. We have lots of opportunities for folks to provide their thoughts, and they may not always translate into changing our water plan, but they may raise a policy question that our utilities board might address. So, and I think that ordinance might have been a good example of how those types of engagements happen and unfold.
Perfect, fantastic, thanks, Kim. Jesse, anything for Woodmore's District on how you engage the community on your decision making?
Yeah, the biggest recommendation I could give everybody if they want to get involved and want to know what's going on within their specific water providers community is attend their board meetings. They're all public meetings, and so they conduct business typically, at least our board does, once a month, sometimes twice a month, and post it on their websites. Almost everybody uses websites now to post their meetings, their dates, their times, their agendas, what's going to be discussed, what action items are going to be taken. So if you want to get involved and get in the know, then attend some meetings.
Fantastic. Okay, great. Councilmember, do you have anything additional you want to add or think?
I would agree. I mean, I think the challenge is trying to get people to engage and to be interested and to show up and learn. I think in my experience, 90% of the time when there's a concern or a question or an issue, it's because there just isn't a full understanding of the matter at hand. And I think if you go to a board meeting or contact a council member or engage with utility staff, you'll get the information that you're looking for, you'll understand, you'll become fully educated on the topic, and oftentimes that really changes the concern because now it's an informed position. So I would agree. I think showing up at board meetings, emailing elected officials, certainly at the city level, and just letting us know what your questions, concerns, and comments are. And we are, whether you believe it or not, we are very interested in hearing from you and really do want to engage with you and understand what your thoughts are. Thanks.
Very good. Okay, thanks. Well, this is the portion of the panel where you all have submitted questions to the group either before the program, which a couple of them I believe we've answered through this, but received those. If you have any additional ones at this time, we do have some folks on the side of the room that are happy to bring them up. I'm going to try to mix and mingle these and do the best we can to get through them. They're all great questions, but if we don't get to your question, I will provide it to the individual that probably has the best information for you to kind of follow up with, if that makes sense. So we're going to get started. I'm going to pick one of my favorites really quick. This gentleman's was a dear friend and a mentor of mine. I learned all of my water from Gary Bostrom. So this is about Gary Bostrom Reservoir. Yes, please give him a round of applause. Amazing man, and then had an opportunity to serve on Parks Board. So I got him back. He got to come back with me. So when can we expect the project to be implemented, Kim? I know you probably get that question about once a week.
Well, I do get the question. So we have permits for that in place. They expire around 2045. We're actually looking at Bostrom as part of this IPR project and what that phasing might look like if we use Bostrom and or Lower Williams for that system. As planners, you know, we kind of always continue to sharpen those pencils, and so we want to understand if we get a benefit out of one or both of those reservoirs for that system as well. And, you know, we'll make decisions probably as we learn through this process on the exact timing of the construction of that reservoir.
Fantastic. Well, I think we're all excited about that. All right. Jesse, I think this might be a question for you, but it may also apply to Kim. If you all would please talk about how the plan for Fountain Creek plays into your community's collaborative approach to getting upstream.
I guess I would ask for just a little bit more context on that. The plan for Fountain Creek, are we talking Fountain Creek Flood Control and Drainage District and the improvements that particular organization is making?
That is my assumption. Where's Allie? Was this your question? Oh, wasn't your question? Okay. Sorry, didn't mean to out you.
Well, specifically for the loop, and I think I'll let Kim speak to Colorado Springs and downstream of, say, the Chilcot Ditch Headgate. But the Chilcot Ditch Headgate, essentially, there's not going to be a whole lot of impact in terms of either us on them or them on us, specifically related to what the Fountain Creek Flood Control District may be doing with potential capturing flood waves and things of that particular nature. But I think Kim and utilities can probably speak a little bit more to that.
Okay. Sure.
I'll do my best, Allie. You just have to smack me later if I get it wrong. No, so, I mean, the Fountain Creek Flood Control and Greenway District was established as part of that SDS permitting, and part of the mitigation was there was a $50 million payment associated to that. They've been working through that mitigation payment to do those mostly stabilization and other projects to manage the flows that go through Fountain Creek. And as far as the future, I mean, like I was saying before, our exchanges, our reuse, all of that really relies on rivers. I mean, Fountain Creek and the Arkansas. And so we will always look at the rivers as far as what is the potential impacts and who are the partners that we need to bring to the table to have those discussions. I can't tell you how many meetings I'm in where flow-related issues are a topic of discussion. And it's not just flow that causes, say, erosion and sedimentation problems, like what the district is really set up to address, but it's the environmental conditions, the fish and the rafting and all of those. And we are at the table. We want to work on those solutions. We know that we probably, as utilities, other water providers, really have a strong role because we own a lot of the water rights in the river, and we have to move and exchange those waters. And so we're always trying to collaborate as much as we can on those water management issues as well as development issues.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. And if you wrote that question, please feel free to follow up with Kim afterwards, just to make sure we got that answered correctly. Brian, this one comes back to you. How does the utility board access subject matter experts to be informed in decision-making?
Well, that's a great question. I think through a few ways. There are a number of us that on the board that I wouldn't say are truly utility subject matter experts, but have some background that really play into managing a utility company. And when I say that, probably mostly from a governance standpoint. When it comes to subject matter experts, we have an incredible staff at CSU who that is truly what they do. That's who they are. And we rely a lot on their expertise. But I, for one, and I don't mean any disrespect to the CSU staff that are here, I, for one, like to question their thinking and like to question, and because I think in some ways that's part of our role as a governing board. When something doesn't quite add up to me, I want to understand why. And they've been great about explaining and bringing us along in that process. In addition to working with the subject matter experts that are on staff, the other thing that we have is the Utilities Policy Advisory Committee, UPAC. And UPAC is an independent body that does not represent or respond to the CSU staff. They work directly for us as a board. And so we have the ability to task them with studying certain topics or researching certain things on our behalf and reporting back to us with recommendations and opinions. And so UPAC, I think, is could be a really good tool, but I would say in my year plus on the board, a slightly underutilized tool that we really need to engage with, and we are actually doing that now in a more meaningful way here just recently. But UPAC, again, is a group of independent folks, many of whom are experts in the utilities industry and in that world, and that's a great resource for us as a board to rely on.
Okay, great, fantastic. All right, I'm going to take this next question, and this may fall in Jesse and Kim's area. This relates to Northeast El Paso County, relies on Denver Aquifer, which we heard a little bit about earlier, in well water. Originally, the southern delivery system extended close to Black Forest. Are there plans for CSU to serve a wider service area? Kim, do you want to start with that? And if there's...
I guess I don't know exactly how that question, but no, I mean, as far as extending the southern delivery system, that's not in the plan. I think what is being considered is more what Jesse was talking about is what does that loop project look like and what components of SDS can we use to make a more of an economic economy of scale decision to support that regional effort around reuse. But as far as expansion, a lot of that is, we have kind of our city boundary as it is, as we've planned to in our 2006 annexation plan. As we know, those change with time, but that would be the extent of our considerations.
Okay. Anything else, Jesse?
No, not much. But as far as the loop system, I mean, we're always looking for partners. So come knocking on the
I think
door.
there's a message there, right? Very good. All right, Kim, I think this might be an easy one. What's the situation with the drained reservoir in North Cheyenne Canyon? And no, I did not put all these park questions in here. When will it be available again?
I believe that's the South Suburban Reservoir
Yes,
that they're
correct.
talking about. And I don't actually know when the repairs next year. So
End of the year.
there was some valve issues and outlet works that needed to be repaired there as this is going to be my plug for aging infrastructure.
There you go.
So in 25 it should be done. Like I said, we started developing in the 1870s. We have a lot of old infrastructure, and sometimes that needs renewed and replaced. And that's just as important as developing our new infrastructure. And so that's where we have to also dedicate a lot of our time, money, and effort so that, that controls water losses, it controls, safety of our delivery systems. And so that's why that reservoir is drained at this time.
Very good.
Can I just tag
Yes.
on to that with a quick thought? My
Absolutely.
assumption is, and I could be off base here, but my assumption is that question came from somebody who was interested in the recreational aspect of that waterway, as opposed to I turned on my tap and nothing came out because that reservoir is drained.
Yeah.
I don't think that was the nature of the question.
puppies.
And so I think it's just a great opportunity to underscore the nexus and the kind of the interweaving between the assets that we have as a city and as Colorado Springs Utilities, and the ability for recreation and the ability to make use of those assets for recreational purposes. You know, obviously the primary purpose of those bodies of water and the waterways that we utilize to move water around the region is to serve utilities, to make sure that you've got water when you do turn on that tap. But I think one of the nice byproducts and benefits, and something that we shouldn't just push aside, is the ability to use those assets and amenities for recreational purposes and for enjoyment purposes. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, because I think if I didn't, Karen probably would get mad at me.
Knows me well. All right. Fantastic. Thank you. All right. I'm going to share. I'm down to my last 4 questions. We have just a few minutes left, so I'm going to do our best with the panelists to get through those as we can so that we can wrap up. And I believe there might be a little whiskey in the back, maybe. And so I don't want to be the panel between you and your whiskey. So we'll keep going here. So this one, we talked a little bit about conservation, I know, and that is really at the heart of what Birgit does in CSU. And the question relates to, why do citizens' conservation efforts mean more allowed growth rather than storage for future drought? Who wants to field that one? Anyone?
I think everyone looks down there.
They're
And I'd
all
like my
going like
whiskey
this.
first. No.
Tim's got it.
I mean, I have an
No,
opinion
I have.
about that,
I
but
think,
go.
yeah, I mean, we live in a semi-arid location and desert. So I guess as a planner, a lot of folks don't know, I also have a landscape architect background. And so I'll put that hat on. I mean, we can have beautiful landscapes on 1 to 3 days of watering, about 12 inches of supplemental water. And, you know, so conservation isn't just about, it's more about living within the environment and the means of which you kind of live. And so, you know, conservation is critical component of our portfolio as we move forward. We know we're going to be developing supplies. Conservation isn't going to get us there all by itself. We can't serve growth just on conservation. But what we can do is instill that ethic on our current customers and our future customers, so that when they come to our community, we have landscapes that are beautiful and vibrant, and they survive on the minimum amount of water that they need.
And I was just going to tag on that from the perspective of storage, right? You've talked a little bit, Kim, about some of the storage systems, and in a year where we've got banner moisture in the winter, we've got to find ways of storing that water, because if we can store it, we can use it. But if we can't store it, we've got to send it down the river. And so that storage component, that capacity component, is huge. I think our target is to have at least a minimum of 1 year of water in storage, but right now we're probably storing close to 3. And if we could get up to 4 or 5, I mean, that would be a total game changer, because again, we would have that ability to stretch that water out and even out those ups and downs between wet years and dry years.
Okay, very good. All right, these next 2 questions, I'm going to kind of bring them together and then we'll wrap up with this last one. But this one talks about planning for the huge growth in Colorado Springs, as well as the growth in population along I-25, Pueblo, Denver, Monument, and Castle Rock, et cetera, et cetera. So we've talked a little bit about that, but I'm going to pull this into maybe this piece as well. This question speaks to specifically annexation. So it says, who bears the cost of increasing the capacity to 125% and upgrading services during annexation? So maybe talk a little bit, one of you or 2 of you, talk a little bit about where that growth is happening and how you're taking that into consideration, because it's not necessarily Colorado Springs, it's all of the things in between. But then also as we expand with annexation, how is that being handled?
Well,
Who wants
I
to
guess
go first?
I can speak for Woodmar. So our fancy word for annexation is called inclusion for Title 32 special districts. And in terms of growth, I mean, the annexation process is really a rigorous process where you collect a lot of information from the applicant, you scrub down that information, you calculate what their annual demands are projected to be, how many, what's the mix, although we're not a land use authority, what are they going to be seeking from, say, unincorporated El Paso County and or, potentially the town of Monument if they actually want to annex into the town of Monument as well. So there's a lot of moving parts when you're dealing with annexations, and of course it all comes back to your planning. We have what we call our long-range plan. We overhaul it about every 5 years. It's a long-range plan that both does water resource planning as well as infrastructure planning from now till what we project our build-out to be in terms of number of SFEs or single-family equivalents, the amount of water that a single-family structure would use. And so there's a lot of moving parts associated with evaluating that. Of course, there's the revenue side of it that you need to evaluate too. They do draw in quite a bit of revenue through tap fees, impact fees, and other fees. And those revenues can go towards many things, building new capital improvement projects, acquiring additional supplies, so on and so forth. So it's the whole host of all of those issues that you really look at when you're considering annexing a certain property into your district.
Very good, thanks.
And I'll talk a little bit about what's in our planning and where we've kind of forecasted that. Similarly, we look at the build out. And so again, when we looked at it in 17, of course, we'll change what that looks like as we do potentially annex. We also have been looking at the methodology in which we understand what that build out looks like. And we're not using population anymore because there has been a decoupling between like a gallons per capita per day measure versus what is going on in the land. And so what's the land use? What's the business, the commercial and different types of use, and where are they at? So we looked at that build out and that according to kind of a land use methodology. And so we actually came up with, we know that we need about 129,000 acre feet at full build out. And that is really without conservation. So we know with conservation, which our customers are really good at doing, and we know we can achieve that, we think it's going to be about 121,000 acre feet. So if you just quickly do the math between where we are today, what our demand is, which is we bump around 70,000, our system can serve 95,000, and we need maybe 121. I like to go in round numbers because we're working on a 50-year horizon. So over the next 50 years, that could be about 25,000 acre feet of new supply. And so that was really developed, and that number was really developed before a lot of the recent annexation discussions have occurred. And so we knew that that's what we were planning for. So that's what our plan incorporates in the portfolio, is how might we achieve that goal over time. And with annexations, we know with the timing of when that demand happens, when build out happens, if we add more through annexation, that was all kind of one of those risks that we couched as a risk-based planning. And we said, okay, here's our range. So we know we're gonna start to incrementally invest and really focus on the timing of getting these resources online about every decade. So we started to chunk out, we've set goals for every decade, and we'll march towards those goals as the city continues to build out. And the goal being we keep in time and pace and investment at the right levels. And I'll just say one other thing is we also had the water resource fee get adopted, where we do a collection with the tap fees and development fees that kind of set aside money for those capital investments and acquisitions that we know we are seeing in the next 10, 20, and 30 years.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kim. Okay, we've got one more question we're going to do, and then we're going to wrap up and bring Stella back up to the podium. This I thought was kind of a fun question. We talked a little bit about reuse, but not for this purpose. How soon before we reuse water for human consumption? Any thoughts on that?
I'm gonna, Colorado Springs reuses 100% of our reusable sources right now, and we actually do that through through our exchange program. We exchange it back up, and it's not the same molecule for molecule, but it goes back to our potable system. So
Okay.
we do already 100% reuse for potable consumption. How's that? I think what they're trying to refer to is more the DPR, or direct potable reuse, or something that's where you're drinking more directly from, I don't know, the wastewater kind of treatment side.
I was waiting for the faces to
Yeah,
go,
like,
is she saying what I think
I'll
she's
get
saying?
smacked if I use the wrong slogan. So, no, we've been looking at that. We actually had a really good pilot program in which we studied that direct potable reuse. Again, with the kind of the efficiency of our exchange program because of indirect potable reuse and other options we might have in front of us to get to those same sources, the DPR, as we call it for short, is probably longer down the road, probably a 30 to 50-year horizon, and especially as regulations change and we know more about how to better treat and serve that type of water.
Very good. Thanks, Kim. All right. Well, let's, if you all would, please give a round of applause to our panelists for the great job that they did. They will be here afterwards if you do have additional questions, or maybe I didn't phrase your question properly. Please take time to meet with them, agree with them, and without further ado, I'm going to welcome back up Stella Hodgkins to close us out.
Thank you, Karen. So thank you to our moderator as well, Karen Pallas, and all of our panelists. So again, we thank you all for attending and for your interest in this subject. Obviously, it's very vital to all of us in the Pikes Peak region. We do have Axe and Oak here for the whiskey tasting, so we encourage you all to just continue the conversation for a little while. The bar will be open till about 5:45, and we do have some snacks in the back as well. We will have another Heritage Series event later this year, so if you're on our mailing list, please be on the lookout for that. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but we will send information out to that to our distribution list. And then also, as a follow-up to this event, we will include some pertinent links that were talked about, resources, also this Colorado Springs Utilities Plan that Kim had mentioned, so that you can access those. And then we encourage you to stay engaged in this conversation. Like Brian said, reach out to your council members. They want to hear from you. Attend the council meetings, and just stay engaged. Thank you all for attending, and we hope to see you at our next event. Good evening.